I'm Brittany Campbell-Turner, and I'm a project management consultant, and I am the founder and CEO of the Constructor podcast. I'm also a lean advocate and blockchain advocate. Absolutely. I think blockchain, in essence, has been around for a long time. Satoshi Nakamoto, he created his first blockchain back in 2009, and we're almost 10 years later, and we're understanding the value of it now. Much like other technologies, it takes time to actually implement and understand the value of it. So blockchain is most prevalent in any area where you're looking to have multiple people interact with accurate information, where it's unchangeable, and where you have to have that accuracy in order to have success within the transaction that you're having. One thing that I like about blockchain is that it doesn't obviously have to be cryptocurrency, right? A lot of people think that it has to be that. And in my presentations, a lot of the time I have to share that, transacting of currency is fine, but it's almost limiting if you're thinking about that. There's so many things that need to be accurate. Anywhere there's a process that has auditing, blockchain is likely very good, a very good solution for documentation and for doing those transactions. I think that obviously finance is a huge industry that I think they see the value in it, and I think it's absolutely going to stay. But supply chain, I think, is another, and I think healthcare also. The information has to be accurate. If you have any inaccuracy, you put people's lives at risk. And I think it's the same thing with supply chain, especially if it is any type of product that's specific to healthcare, or anything that really needs to have its integrity for whatever the functionality is of the transported goods. So I think those three, to me, are the strongest industries, Yeah, I think cities is a really interesting one. I look at the likes of Dubai, for instance, and I say, okay, well, that's a brand new city. And they were able to look at what other industrialized cities have done, and they needed more, and so they implemented more right away. And I think the use of blockchain in a city that is in really fast development because of the need, whether it's the population growth in a particular area, I think absolutely there's going to be adoption in cities like that. Older cities, I think that it will take a bit more time because of the infrastructure question, When you say infrastructure, to me that's setting electrical, that's setting up your distribution lines, that's setting up your data, that's setting up the buildings themselves. And if you have so many things that are just existing already within infrastructure and the roads themselves, it's going to be hard to go back and plug everything back into a blockchain for those transactions. Energy I like. I talked a little bit already about distribution and the technology, microgrids. I'm really fascinated by that, and I think it's not as hard as we may think it is. I know that there are companies already working on distributing energy through microgrids and doing those transactions. It's a matter of getting government, I think, on board, and those power companies on board. I know that in Chicago, that's something that we're already looking at. Siemens is pushing at that, and ComEd is on board with investigating different ways to transact energy, and it's a matter of storage, and understanding what the best ways are to do that. I think that's the next step for energy sector. Transport's an interesting one. I really think that we're moving into an age of share for transport. Obviously, we have our trains, we have our planes, we have our public transport setup, but I think the individual transport is going to change a bit. Lots of people like to talk about autonomous vehicles, and I have no clue as to whether that's going to be adopted soon, if it's going to be adopted at all. People enjoy having that autonomy, like that ability to manage their own way to get around. So we'll see. 10 years, I don't really see autonomous vehicles coming along, but I think when we talk about blockchain and transportation, I think thinking about how transportation is going to affect our buildings, and what that means for how the buildings are now going to be designed to accommodate your transportation and vehicles associated with it. I mean, now Uber is very prevalent. Any rideshare program is very prevalent. I can come to work, drive to work, and set up my car to be utilized by someone throughout the day, and they can pay for that. And I think blockchain will allow for people to feel like they can really rely on a system to make sure that the identities of those people are credible in order for them to actually do that process. So I think that's an application that as we move more towards the ride share capability and think about how we want to transact data and trust people with our vehicles or transport mechanisms, I think that's going to be a possibility that we can shift to, but that may be 20 years from now, as we accommodate for the different ways of transportation. The use cases for implementing contracts, we have them today, right? We know that there are platforms that can allow for you to have legitimate language articulated in a smart contract, and you can identify fields of information that can be variable and identify those and really essentially do sort of a micro contract process. I think that's the most viable application that can impact very many things, and I think if we get that right, then it can allow for other use cases to be more prevalent. Are we there for construction? I think we have a long way to go because of the complexity of the contracts that we implement. But I do think in real estate, I do think for more simple contracts, I mean, I know that NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, simple contract mechanisms that really have very few terms for you to modify. I think that's going to be very simple, and you can always be checking against that in a live version and making sure that you're meeting whatever that contract language commits you to. I think that's the starting point of rolling out any other use cases effectively. That's a very good question. and I think that the markets are going to tell us. I think that it's about building awareness as to what the technology can actually provide for us and getting people really to give us that feedback. As a CBC, I think that we should really be boots on the ground, asking people regularly, how do you think this can be applied to what you're already doing? How do you see the convergence of technologies that you are already using with blockchain right now, whether it be AI, machine learning, IoT sensors? I think that there is a transition of mindset taking place that will allow for people to identify those things more clearly. I can't tell you what's missing because I think that's something that's going to emerge out of simply building awareness. I think the CBC should act on what the market comes to them with. I think that if there is a use case that any company is coming up with, and saying, okay, well, we want to see if this makes sense, if this can actually be implemented. I think it's worth it for us to investigate it and go down that rabbit hole and try to figure it out, especially if they see it making an impact on their business and really improving their transactions within their environment. Yeah, obviously in the financial realm, where we've seen the validated approach, and I think that from a financial institution perspective, we see a lot of money being thrown into research around the utilization of use cases within normal fiat environments. So yeah, I think that those have been vetted. I do think that we should be looking at Internet of Things a bit more and modeling what supply chain is doing. I think there are going to be quite a few within the built environment. I will say the reasons why we'll have limitations, I'll start with that, is simply because of the mindset around adoption of technology. I think that we're slow going as an industry when we think about implementing technology. Yes, I think records will tell you the most amount of money that has been invested into software technology specifically for the built environment has been invested this past year, which is amazing. But I do think that the mindset around really figuring out how technology can support the built environment, I'll say that in a different way. Just implementing software is different than implementing blockchain. The components of blockchain that really matter are behavioral science, if you will, the governance structure, understanding how people should interact and interrelate, and allowing for the blockchain to support that. I've been doing a lot of investigation probably over the last 18 months of trying to understand this myself. What's missing, or what's the impact? Like how can we actually think through this process and really get people onboarded with the idea, first of all, understand it at a high level, understand that there are many different types of blockchain applications, and in addition to that, get them to think about applications for what they do on a day-to-day basis. I think that there's going to have to be an entrepreneurial mindset that comes in, but not necessarily from outside of the industry. We have to start thinking about it within. And I think part of that is we run the risk of having someone come into the industry and really disrupt us. But I think we need to think about disrupting ourselves. So one is mindset. I think that's what provides the limitations. And it's really just understanding what the applications are. So I think it's really twofold. Obviously, there's regulatory. Obviously, there's so many different parties that are part of the construction process. You have real estate, you have design, you have construction, you have facilities management, you have insurance, you have funding, you have regulatory, your municipalities, right? You have, if you're thinking about implementing blockchain at large, you have to make sure that these parties are on board. Whoever is participating in that process will have to be really considering what the benefits are of whatever the application is, and buy into the idea. And I think it's going to take time, just like anything. It's building awareness and getting people on board with the idea. I would even pose an alternate question. How do we want to work? And how can we allow for blockchain to support the way we work? I do think that construction is an industry where we're looking at ways to optimize it. And one of the things that I'm passionate about is lean construction. And the key pillars are respect and the pursuit of continuous improvement. I think that that's not ingrained in the construction industry globally at large in any way, shape, or form. And I think that understanding what effective team building is and understanding how to map that onto a governance structure that can be supported, that can support mapping that onto a governance structure for a blockchain technology to support the way we'd like to operate as an effective team on construction projects, that's the key. I think that the immutability of blockchain poses a risk, and I've been investigating this myself. I think that the possibility to incorporate a dispute resolution layer, because of the way that we work, we need the mechanism to resolve disputes on projects because there are unforeseen conditions that come up. There are new asks from the client that we cannot anticipate. And I think that those are the things that we have to sort of figure out when we're implementing blockchain. It isn't most blockchains are immutable, and you rely on that record to be unchanging. But I think there has to be a mindset around what are we going to do to manage something that needs to change. And I think that poses a risk. The legal aspect of things, how do you have a precedence? We don't have a precedence for blockchain. And I think that's something that construction lawyers are looking at in this industry right now. How do you manage, from the legal perspective, how you're going to resolve these technological security issues? And or if it's blockchain, how are you going to document and or judge, if you will, something that documents every little step of the way in minute, it can be minute detail. It can almost be a security concern, right? I think those are the things that pose the most risks. And I'm interested to see where we navigate and mitigate them. Yeah, I think that those who work in the built environment may not trust blockchain if it doesn't work for them. And I think that we're going to have to get through some of those hurdles in order to really say, okay, well, this is the type of application that will work for us versus this other type of application. And I think it's just a matter of testing, and we have to go through this test environment and understand that that's what it is. We're building use cases, we're building pilot projects, and it's going to just take time. There will be a little bit of failure within that alpha and beta phase of whatever the application is.